Hey, it's Rod Yates here. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Humans of Music, a Jaxsta podcast. Each episode, I talk to a music creator or industry professional about their life and career, the ups and downs of their journey, and the lessons they've learned along the way. And my special guest is singer-songwriter James Vincent McMorrow. James has just released his 5th album, which is called Grapefruit Season. It features contributions from producers and writers like Kenny Beats and Adele collaborator Paul Epworth, and sees James embracing the synths and hip-hop production elements he first started utilising on his second record, Post-Tropical. Now, I don't know if you can remember back to when that record came out, but when he released it, it shocked quite a lot of people. Because James's debut album, Early in the Morning, was more in the new folk realm, and people were expecting him to continue down that route. But as with contemporaries like Bon Iver, James has well and truly evolved beyond his first album, and we talk about that journey in this interview. We also discuss his upbringing in Ireland, his path to success, and the mental health issues he's dealt with along the way. But we started by talking about James's new album, Grapefruit Season. I've seen a quote from you where you've said that it's an album about being okay with never being okay, and of never achieving that higher level of understanding or perspective on life. When did you make peace with that?
I mean, I think it'd probably be a bit too zen of me to say I've made peace with it, because I think I wake up every day and I'm still trying to fight certain elements. But you know what? It speaks more specifically to my experience as a musician, because I that's my reality, right? So from a very early age, my identity and my sense of well-being and my sense of self-worth was derived from being a musician, talking to people like you, even in the beginning, explaining myself, getting on stage. There's almost like a competitive nature to it. And then as success comes and the levels build and stuff like that, everything, the structure that you build in your life, in my life anyway, was sort of basically all built around this like mausoleum to my own ability or something. And it all felt a little hollow. And I would look at other people in my life, other successful musicians, and I would sort of like have these ideas. Irish people have this sort of thing called catastrophizing, where we sort of like run these worst case scenarios in our heads. And I would do that, but not with catastrophe. I would sort of look at other musicians and think they have it so together. They seem so complete. They look like a musician. They seem like a musician. And I would not feel that way. I guess imposter syndrome is a big part of it too. But I think I just woke up one morning and there's a song on the record called Gone. And it was the first song that I wrote for this album. And when I was writing it, I was in a hotel in London, and I got to the pre-chorus and I wrote that lyric, I give less fucks than I used to, but I still give a lot of fucks. You can bleep me out if I can't curse.
No, swear your head off.
Don't give me that license. And when I wrote that, it felt like, in a weird way, the most honest and sort of revelatory thing I'd ever written in my life, which was really unexpected. And I Googled it to make sure that no one else had said it on a song before, because I remember thinking that I feel like someone has to have taken that. And I kind of took that with me as like a mantra and started reverse engineering back through all of those feelings and emotions that I just talked about, of not feeling a certain way, or, oh, if I just do this next thing, that will make me feel the way I'm supposed to feel. And realizing that I'm missing so much good stuff because I was on to the next thing constantly. If that's not a relatable human emotion, then I don't know what is. And it felt like something to make an album around, because for a long time I felt like I needed to do certain things to be liked or respected and understood. And I think if I was to look back at my career, I would see moments where I wasn't doing things for what I wanted to do, but almost based on what other people's idea of me was. And I was then reabsorbing it and thinking, okay, I need to do that. And to just lose that and to just try and give it away was quite a revelatory moment for me. Now, I'm not saying that it's maintained all the time. I still succumb, and I still, when records come out, I'm still like, I really hope people like it, and I really hope people understand it. And you sort of fall into that trap. But yeah, I wanted to just be more at peace with the idea of never finding that peace.
Which is a huge revelation, and not easy to achieve at all, I imagine.
No, not at all. No.
Did you confide in anyone? You mentioned that you were looking at other musicians and you thought they've all got it so together. Look at, they know what they're doing. Did you ever talk to other musicians and say, I don't feel that way? Do you feel that way? Do you feel like you look?
I think during the lockdown period last year, so the album was finished. So while I was making the record, no is the answer. But when it all got taken away last year, and again, because all of us found our sense of self-worth from being out there in the world and the public's opinion of us. To have all that taken away, to not be able to go on a stage and have that feeling and those chemical releases in your brain led to a lot of dark days within a lot of musicians, a lot of artists. So we would communicate on that level. And I think we've all been on the same path. Like, so we would, without asking the question, do you feel that way? People were offering it to me. Like, I've been finding the same as you. I've been finding all of my energy comes from being a musician. And then when I go back to my house right now, I'm not doing anything. I'm just this like lonely person in a room by themselves.
Right.
And that was like, it's a hard thing to hear because these are people you love, but also at the same time, like, it did almost give us all a shared sense of like community. And for me, it did help me to understand that without asking, yeah, we those people don't have it together. No one has it together. Like, nobody does. Like, you know, like I don't use social media a lot. I've never been very forward facing, but it's obviously a huge part of like the career of a musician or an artist but not just that, it's the forward face of you or anybody else that has something that or even just anybody wants to sell a vision of themselves, right? And you don't know what happens after the photo gets taken. Like, we live in a world where that is quite exhausting on that level, because if you were to take everything as a truth based on what you see on your phone, everybody's lives are better than yours because everyone presents this unbelievable picture. And if you just, the reason the album is called Grapefruit Season is because grapefruit is one of those things that I used to eat that I was told was good for me, even though I never really did any research on it. I know it is good for me, but it became like the avatar for all of those things I'm talking about, where like, if you were to do all of the things that people say will make you feel better, then you would be exhausted and you wouldn't feel any better. And you don't know that what those people that are selling you these ideas and these agendas are actually doing or feeling. So last year was a very helpful reminder to me that we are all kind of creating this false front. And with this album, I for me personally, I was just trying to remove an amount of that false front and just be a bit more candid with people.
I remember seeing someone say something once that when you're looking at someone's Instagram feed, you're not envying their life, you're envying their Instagram feed. That's pretty much what you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's powerful and it's potent, and our brains are sort of rewired at this point to almost accept everything we see as truth. You know, like you see someone say something and your instinct is to be like, oh, that's crazy. And then you sort of lose that questioning thing. And I still fall for it. Like, I still go on Instagram every night and scroll through and I'm like, oh, that person's doing that. I wonder where that person is. And I realized that people do the same for me. During this album, I think I realized the reciprocal nature in a way that I hadn't before, that people look to me for a certain amount of guidance and support musically, and they would go on my Instagram feed and be like, oh, James is here and there, and you'll do it. You'll be like, you know, you're in a nice hotel in LA or something, and you take a photo of like the hashtag sunset, and everybody's just like, oh my God, you're living that life. But I could be crying in my hotel room. You don't know. Like, it's just, you know, to try and bring the crying in the hotel room, I guess, to the stage was the goal of this album, rather than just a photo of the sunset.
So does that make it a more emotional album than anything you've done before?
Yeah, for me, singing the songs, I'm a lot more connected to it, I think, in a very real-time space than I was with my other albums. There's songs that when I sing, I'll never get tired of singing them. Like, there's a song off my first album called We Don't Eat. I'll never get tired of singing that. There's a song called Cavalier off my second record. I'll never get tired of singing that. Like, because if I was to go and analyze the songwriting, I'm actually doing on those songs what I'm doing a lot more now, which is bringing an amount of myself to it. I was still working very hard to find metaphors to say the things I wanted to say. I'm not working that hard to try and use metaphor anymore. I'm trying to be candid. And I think what that brings is a greater sense of connection between me and the music, which then translates to the audience, which again is not an equation that I ever really thought about historically. People have always shown up to shows and I've performed and people have liked it, and that's always been the norm. And then last year again, it was taken away. So you question this a lot more. But even previous to that, I was understanding what people come to my shows for and not wanting to make music based on what people, you know, come to you for, but also it was more appreciating it. Do you know, like appreciating that, like, those songs and those candid moments in those songs are the things that are the true resonators with people. And they're also the moments that I happen to love the most. So to try and expand on that felt like a really compelling thing to do at that point.
Yeah. You mentioned that lyric before, I give less fucks than I used to, still give a lot of fucks, which is a genius line. And in the past, you've said that one of the things that hobbled you to an extent was that you did give too many fucks. You did worry about how songs would be interpreted.
Yeah.
Is there a period in your career where you felt more stifled by that than any other time?
Yeah, I think the first album and the second album, I think, were like the moments where I struggled the most with people's, I would say, misunderstanding of me. But it was a misunderstanding that in hindsight I can understand, because I wasn't doing things like this. I wasn't speaking, I wasn't occupying the music in a vocal way. I was releasing music and then sort of letting the world, I guess, decide what it made of it. And I think I realized that the world needs you to fill in the picture for it, and that is a part of this job that I didn't necessarily appreciate and embrace. I could put it down to the fact that I struggled a lot in the beginning with anxiety. I'm quite a shy person historically, so in the beginning, the fact that I released music at all, I felt like was a win. The fact that, we started to sell a lot of it was incredible, but there was a lot of, I guess, not misunderstanding, but like, I never occupied the music, and I wish I had, because I think that it would have done me a lot of good, and I think it would have helped people understand. I don't think it's not holding people's hand through the process. It's just merely saying, this is why I made this music and this is what I believe. And if you don't do that, like, a lot of people can run riot and kind of like just like go, oh, you're trying to do this, you're trying to do that. And I wasn't trying to do anything. I was a person with a guitar at the start of my career, but I'm not a guitar player. It was a medium for me. It was like so that when I moved then to like more synth-based music along with guitars, and then I started incorporating a lot of my other loves, which is like, a lot of rap production, a lot of like, 808s, a lot of Moog synthesis, a lot of different elements, and then bringing back in acoustic guitars and different things. Not that there was confusion there, but there was certainly a lot of like, oh, you're trying that now, or you're trying that. And it took a long time because I wasn't out there going, no, I'm not trying anything. I'm doing this because this is what I know how to do.
Yeah.
I think that it taught me a lesson that like you need to occupy the music, not just physically in the studio, but physically in the real world. You need to be that person that's like, this is what I'm doing. And not that you need to hold people's hands, like I say, but you just, it's good to be open. It's good to be occupied. And when I wasn't doing that, I was struggling for sure.
And I imagine part of occupying those songs and that music is not getting upset when people misconstrue things, when people hear post-tropical and go, wow, okay, you've changed. You're trying to do this now. You've got to temper your own emotions. Is that part of occupying the songs?
Yeah, it is. But like I failed miserably with that. Like when Post Tropical came out, I was making decisions that, again, in hindsight, were pretty wild. Like the lyrics for that album to this day, as far as I'm aware, aren't available on the internet. I didn't put them anywhere. I didn't put them on the inlay card. I had this idea that I wanted the album to just be a mood piece, and I think if a psychologist was to get their hands on me at the time, they would have said I was trying to like erase myself from the situation, because I just wasn't coping very well with being in whatever the relative limelight was. We sold 200,000 physical copies of the first record, and we did it independently. So we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants. And then we came into the second record, and I was trying to make a statement, but I'm not sure what the statement was. I'm not sure what statement I was trying to make. I think I could argue I was trying to, like I say, remove myself and let the music be this tapestry that would speak for me. But again, that's not how it worked out. People heard the record, and depending on where you were, like Australia, for instance, that album was very successful. When Cavalier came out, that song suddenly became this big record in Australia. Whereas when I was giving it to my record label, they were like, no one is going to play this. Like this song is 5.5 minutes long. You refuse to make an edit. And that's how it worked out in a lot of places. And that, the rollout of the album was very slow and very strange. The labels just didn't know what to do with me. Like they really didn't. It was very protracted and messy because I wasn't giving them that other side of it. I wasn't saying, this is what I'm doing and this is how we can sell it. I'm the last person to think of their music as a commodity, but it is, right? And I think I never got to that place with that album. And time has been very kind to that record, where at the time, I really struggled, like when it came out and people didn't understand it, it hit me very hard. And, I stopped using all social media for 1.5 years because I just couldn't handle that interaction. And the shows were amazing and everything was great, but I just was not coping very well either with that idea of people not understanding me. But that said, it led me to the next record, which was then me. Because I'm always up for a challenge, I guess. Like I'm a pretty, like I said at the start, I'm a competitive person, And I don't want to fail in this endeavor, which is to make the best music and to be the truest version of myself as a musician. So coming off the back of Post-Tropical, I learned the lessons. Like I learned what I needed to do to be happy and to be content with the music and to understand it and to be able to be on stage and occupy it. Because like I said, songs like Cavalier, I can get on stage all day long and occupy. But there's songs on that album with Post-Tropical period that like I was doing it because I felt like I needed to do it. I needed a song that did that rather than saying, this is what I want from this song. This is what I want to get on stage and sing. So it's all process.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier your love of hip hop and 808s, and I wanted to take you back quite a long way now to what I believe is the first record you ever bought, which is in that world of hip hop, which is Snoop Dogg, Doggy Style.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
What are your memories of that day and of getting that record?
I remember it vividly because it was like I grew up in the suburbs of Dublin in Ireland, and that there's like not a lot of record stores and stuff. So like if you go to a record store, it's with your parents. And I don't know how old I was. I must have been like 10 or 12. And my parents they're pretty liberal individuals. But like that said, like again, with like the parental advisory sticker on everything. And I bought 2 or 3 records that day, all of which had the sticker on it. And I think I bought it because of that. Like I bought Snoop Dogg, Doggy Style. I also bought Blood Sugar Sex Magic by Red Hot Chili Peppers. And then I bought a third album, which I can't even remember. I think it was a strange one. Like, I think it was Throwing Copper by a band called Live. There was a guy across the road from me he was like older, and I kind of looked up to him, and he really liked that band. So I bought that record as well. But I hid them. Like it was that sort of like everything you hear, you're hiding it under mattresses. You're kind of doing all that stuff. It just felt like, I love that feeling. When even as I'm talking about that feeling of like you want this so much that like you're gonna hide it from your parents. You're gonna listen to it like surreptitiously. You're gonna like on the down low go to your friend's house and listen to music. Like these are the things you forget as you get older through music and stuff like that. And music more importantly, when music becomes a commodity, a thing that you're selling and you're using it to feed 16, 17 people, you're using it to buy houses and cars, all these different things. Like it's inevitable that the interaction with music changes. And that had not occurred to me so much until this album, where I was like, my interaction with music has changed. I'm using it to kind of feed this beast, and I want to go back to a point where I'm using it to feed my soul, to make myself happy, to like feel those little moments of excitement. And like again, hand on heart, there's moments in this record where there's a song called Planes in the Sky in this album, and it's got a groove to it that when we did it in the studio, I think we played it for like 2-3 hours, where we were just like playing the groove over and over again, drums, bass, me playing guitar. And when I didn't sing anything, it didn't happen, but it was like that moment of like, oh shit, this is something like, and I remember thinking, if I don't fuck up this song, like this is going to be a good piece of music. And there's so many moments like that on this record with Gone. When I did Gone in the studio with my friend Henry, we didn't know each other. I had this idea. I came in with these chords. He had this old Russian synthesizer. And I just started playing the chords, and he immediately was like, don't stop what you're doing. And he just built this sort of like Manu Katché Afrobeat rhythm around it within 10 minutes. I went home to the hotel, wrote the lyric the next day or that night, came back, and it was finished. I haven't had that in my life in so long. So when you talk about those records when I was a kid, I think about these records now and the feeling that I get, and more importantly, the feeling I hope other people get. Like, because, I'm not saying some 12-year-old kid is going to go buy this record because it's a song that's got the word, like me saying fuck on it or whatever, or there's like a parental advisory sticker on it. But like, still, the potential for those moments to happen, I think is worth bringing into your brain when you're making music and trying to think about how people, like I said earlier, how people receive and how people want to digest music. They want to feel that moment. They want to feel like this is something that, even though they know millions of copies have been sold, that this is still for them. Like that's how I felt with those records. Yeah. That's how I felt when I first heard the Neptunes or first heard Any or D, all these touchstone records for me. It didn't feel like I was in a community. It felt like it was just me. I had this album. Like, how have I got this record? How do I own this thing? Yeah. I found myself just back in a place like that. Maybe more so because of the philosophical nature of the last year and a half that it's ramped up again with me. But I just love that idea and trying to find a way into that and have fun. Why do you have to lose fun just because music becomes commerce? It doesn't feel right. I want to get back to the other way.
Yeah. Are you conscious of having lost that at any point in your career? Now that you've rediscovered it, but are you conscious of when you lost it?
No, I wouldn't say I'm conscious of when I lost it. I would argue that it maybe was never there until recently. So I think that the nature of a career arc, I guess I can only speak to my career arc. I never had any moment where, like in the beginning when I was a kid and I was on MySpace and I was getting a lot of that sort of positive reinforcement. And weirdly enough, I was in a studio in London a couple of weeks ago, and there was a producer in there, this guy called Quez. He's an amazing producer. He puts records on Warp Records. And I walked in the room and I was like, oh my God, like I knew you from MySpace. We used to be friends like when we were kids on MySpace, and I haven't seen him in real life ever. And it just had that weird moment. But like I think those were the last moments when like music was just this limitless potential. No one is telling me why what I do isn't good enough or I need to change it. Because once I got into the sharp end of the music business, that's all that happened was like, like everyone just told me because of my, when I say mental limitations, I know that's like, it whips up a lot of like emotive responses. Like if anyone that doesn't know my story, when I was a kid, I struggled a lot. I had a really bad eating disorder. I was in hospital for quite a long time. Music was like became my healer, I guess, for want of a better term. It's quite a flowery term, but it's true. And that was where I found solace and fun and frivolousness, and I found a community and a sense of connection. And all the way through, I just wanted to make music because it helped me feel better. I never thought about it. I knew I was going to do this my whole life, but I never thought about the business side of it. I just wanted to do it. And then people were like, you need to go get on stage because you've got all these songs and they're really good, but you need to now go sing it. And I was sort of going like to myself, like, I can't even sing in my house to my, like, mom. I would only sing when my parents left. Like they would leave for work and I would rehearse, I would sing. They would come home and I'd be watching TV like nothing had happened. So like I wasn't built for it at all, but I was sort of thrust into it. And because I wasn't inclined to be open and honest, this would have been around 2007, 2006. I just wasn't like, it wasn't like it is now. You couldn't, not everything was, there's a normalization of so many things that needed to be normalized now that just weren't even then. So I couldn't be like, mentally, I'm just not capable of this, right? So I just went and did it. I went and played shows. They weren't very good, but because people didn't know why they weren't very good, a lot of people then just started telling me why I wasn't good enough. And it was like automatically it became this thing where I was trying to fix all these problems that people said I had. And then when I went to make music, I signed a publishing deal, but no one wanted to give me a record deal because, again, these same issues cropped up. So then music sort of became almost like I'll show you, it became this very like, I had these songs, I knew it was good, let me show you why you were all wrong. And I think even then, if I look back, there was no fun in that. Like I had the songs and I stand over them to my dying day. But because of the preamble up to making music, how the fun had been sort of sucked out of it by all these people telling me where all my limitations lay. And then me being quite a resilient, competitive sort that was like, I'm going to figure this out because I want to do this. So it worked out for me in that sense. But also I think that was sort of when that sort of frivolous love of it was lost, where it went from being like me on MySpace to being a guy that was like riddled with self-doubt and trying to like navigate that as a young musician. And then as I went through and success happened, then those levels come up and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I need to feed this beast. I need to keep putting music into the world that like feeds this thing. And yeah, I think it was just coming around that time of like, I put out a little record called True Care. I made it in 2 weeks. And there was I had no expectations for it. Like it wasn't a commercial thing. It was like done like I'd put out an album before that was quite commercially successful. So I sort of felt protected for the first time in my life. I was like, I can do this. I can just put out something that's like weird and doesn't need to do anything other than just exist. And that was the first time in my whole life that I'd done that. And it felt amazing. And I carried that energy into this album as well. Even though this album was a different entity, it just felt the same. I was just like, who cares? Like, as long as you're happy, you'll always figure it out. So like, for me, I mean, like I'll always figure it out. So just find that sense of freedom again.
After the break, James talks about writing his debut album early in the morning and overcoming the mental health issues that threatened to end his career before it began. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with James Vincent McMorrow. I mean, let's go back to those MySpace days. So is that where you started actually putting your music out into the world? Was that the vehicle that you used?
Yeah. MySpace was like everything for me when I was a kid. It was amazing. So good. Yeah.
And when did you actually even start writing?
Oh, like again, I was very specific. I was like, I know my own limitations, so I'm not going to finish a song and give it over to the world unless I know it's good. Because if I put out something too soon and people don't like it, I was like, I don't think I'll recover. So I waited quite a few years. Like I was in my house writing these little ideas and thinking, like, I don't think other people can do this. Like I think I'm doing something that is interesting and unique, but again, not wanting to test the premise. So I just kept it to myself. And then one day I had this song, I think it was called As I or something like that. And it was very gospel-y. It was around that time of that, like Katie Tunstall, like a lot of like guitar looping on, or like hand claps on pedals and stuff. And I think it was very in that world. It was a good song. And I put it up on MySpace, and I had this other song that was like, and this again speaks to my career in the fact that like I'm a genre hopper. Like I've been post genre my whole life. The other song I put up was like a pop punk song called like I Wrote You a Letter. It was very childish tune, but I still have them, and they actually were good songs, and I put them both up. And that was my first moment into it, where I was like, these are songs I can stand behind. And then I woke up the next morning and there were nice comments about them from people, and it was like that sense of gratification. You know. Yeah.
What's your family thinking at the point? Because if you wouldn't even sing in the house until they left the house, and then all of a sudden you start putting songs out, what are they thinking about that? And then your desire to actually make this a career?
My parents were good. They were pretty hands off in that sense. I think because I had been sick when I was younger, I think they were just happy that I was happy, and they weren't going to pull at the thread of it too much. I'm sure that they were getting close to losing that sense of patience around the time I started putting music on MySpace. And then I would give them like burnt CDs to listen to in their car, and they would like it. They would they would genuinely be like, this is good. You should keep doing this. My mum is a very impressive. They're impressive people. Everyone thinks their parents are impressive. Like they were impressive people as a kid, because my mum worked a lot, and she was like in a very patriarchal world, especially in Ireland in the 90s. My mum was she worked and she ran a company, and she was an impressive person. And I think I took a lot from that. She was defining her own path. She went to college, but she didn't do anything related to what she did in college. My dad, the same. So they had a sense of like entrepreneurial spirit and sort of fuck it flair to them. So they allowed me to pursue it as long as I was achieving something that they could tangibly see. So every now and then I'd feed them a song, and they'd be like, okay, this is cool. You can keep going. We'll keep letting you stay in our house for free. And that was sort of that like they understood that I was a quiet person. So the fact that I wasn't singing in front of them, and they respected it in a very quiet way, it was lovely in hindsight.
Yeah.
You don't appreciate it at the time, right? But like I do very much appreciate it now.
Yeah. You mentioned your mum's profession. What did your dad do?
My dad was like, they basically ran a company together. So like they ran an import-export company. My mum was an accountant, so she sort of ran the business side of it. My dad was like the face of the business.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what's the trajectory then from putting songs onto MySpace to then? I think you were 24 when EMI Universal, I don't know if they signed you or they courted you, but they took you went down to London to meet with them and to play for them. What was the trajectory to that point?
Well, I signed a publishing deal very quickly with EMI, which is now Sony ATV. I signed that around that time. I think I was 23, 24 for sure. And moved to London with the expectation that I would sign a record deal and that the next things would just happen, because that's what happens. You get in rooms. Once it started working, you get in rooms with people and they're just like, you're gonna meet this lawyer and they're gonna sign you up and they're gonna bring you to these meetings and you're gonna get this and you're gonna get that. And again, I wasn't telling people, well, just to let you know, like, fragile wise, I'm pretty fragile. I'm not well built for these meetings, or for, I might get on stage and implode. It might be a bad show, which it was. That's what happened. A lot of people came to my shows and they weren't great. I'd sort of stop halfway through songs, or I'd like forget my lines, or I'd like, stop playing guitar because I was so caught up in singing. It just wasn't a thing that really connected with, so a lot of A&Rs leaving shows halfway through, a lot of that sort of reality. And my expectations were very high because I've been fed a lot of positive stuff. So that was the next stage, was sort of like being in London, signing a publishing deal, basically spending all that money on living in London because it was really expensive, and coming home like quite profoundly with my tail between my legs. Yeah.
That's a pretty steep learning curve, and lessons
Yeah.
to learn quite early in your career as well. How do you even come to terms with that? How do you go back home to Ireland and not just put your instrument down, put the guitar down and just stop?
Because I knew that there was a record there to be made, and I knew that I had the capability to commit it to tape. I wasn't thinking that I was the producer. I wasn't my first choice or my 15th choice of producer to make that record, but like it was the reality that was presented to me. And like I said a couple of times, I am a competitive person, competitive with myself, and I think there was no variation of my life right now or at that point where I came home and was just like, well, I gave it a shot. You know, I know that that's a reality for a lot of musicians. It's a really hard business, but I just was not willing to stop. And I had enough people in my life that believed in me. You know, I'd signed with EMI. My A&R Felix was a very interesting character, still is. But he was true blue music. He really got it. And he believed in me in a kind of strange way. And same with my manager. Like I've had like variations of a management team over the years, but I've always had one key guy, Ken, and he came to a show really early on, and they kind of were like, we get this, we understand what you are. So it was like the world was telling me no, but a couple of people were telling me yes, and that was enough for me, because all you need is one rock to latch onto as an anchor, right? So that was it. Went home, took all the recording equipment that I had assembled before I went to London, which was pretty basic, but again, did the job. And then just went to a house and just lived there for 6-7 months and made the record. And then I guess the rest is history.
That's it. That's Early in the Morning is the record that you made. What were your hopes when you were in that house and recording this record for 6 or 7 months? What were you even hoping for?
Well, I mean, it's like what we said earlier. Like, I think at that point, that sort of like frivolous light had been extinguished to a degree. Like I wasn't going in with this like exalted sense of purpose. It was still very workmanlike. It was like, wake up, record, watch TV, eat dinner, record, never. And then like I was going to sleep at like 5-6 in the morning, which is where the title of the album came from. And I just had this, it was a repeated cycle of very few revelations at the time. But you know, because this is the thing, if you're doing something in real time, if you're in the middle of running the world record 100-meter sprint, I don't think you know that you're running the world record. You know that you're doing something and you know that it's potentially good, but you're not taking it in real time. Like you're just focusing on the thing in front of you. So like I was just focusing on the next thing. And I was thinking back on the album last night. There's a song called And If My Heart Should Somehow Stop on that record, which I love playing live and I've sort of rediscovered a real love for. And I remember I had maybe 20 or 30 versions of the chorus of that song that I was trying up there, because I went in with very little material. Actually, I went in with like a sense of what I could do. I had We Don't Eat, I had a couple of other songs, but there was a real speculative sense to that album in the room on the day. So there was probably a very workmanlike attitude towards it, that I wasn't like sitting with a guitar writing a song going, okay, this is really good. I was really throwing a lot of stuff at the wall to see where I could get to. And it was a lot of like, okay, we're 5 months into a process I thought would take 4 weeks. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep going.
Right.
And just get there. Yeah. So it wasn't, you know, there's a lot of mythology that gets added around records like that after the fact. And I probably contributed to that at the time as well. But the reality is it was very workmanlike and very stressful and very monotonous in a lot of ways, you know, like music, you know, people see the making ofs and they think like making music is just pure like excitement and I'm going to go in the booth and spit hot fire all the time. And it's not, it's like, it's 90% real graft, 10% those moments.
Right. And it was a bit of a sleeper hit. I think it was almost a year before it really started to get traction. During that year, did that trigger any of those feelings that you had about the people telling you that you weren't good, that maybe this wasn't connecting, maybe I don't have this?
Yeah. You know, you'd be crazy if that didn't occur to you. You have to have such a specific makeup to be a successful musician. You have to have imposter syndrome, but also unbelievable sense of self-confidence. You have to have, it's such an oxymoronic blend. It's like you have to have like this just sense of self-belief and self-possession while also being unbelievably mentally fragile. Like all of the things exist in a harmony, I guess, but a very strange harmony. And I knew the record was good. I knew it was good. Like, I'm not a narcissistic type. I'm not an egotistical type. I don't think. Anyway, people might tell you different. But I knew it was good. And I'm patient. I don't believe in this like tight cycle. Like for music that I make, I was like, you can wait a year. It might take a year sometimes for music to catch hold. It wasn't like the world had heard it and told me no. It was in Ireland. I had released it in Ireland. We were going to countries like the UK, Germany, trying to get licenses. No one really wanted it. And then halfway through that first year, we probably sold like 1,000 copies in Ireland. And then a couple of labels started calling, right? Like, so like, I had gotten a couple of syncs. Like my music had been used in like Grey's Anatomy and a few different things. So some US labels started calling. So there was enough stuff at each point to kind of make me go, no, okay, no, that person has hit me up now and they want this record. So I think that there's something here. And then that sort of snowballed where like by the time we got to the summer, the album suddenly sort of jumped to number one in Ireland after I did a performance on TV. And then that weekend I signed a licensing deal with this label for Europe. And it felt like, okay, that's a step. And then people started playing the songs. And then it just sort of became a thing, right? So like it wasn't as if it was a barren year. It was there were little moments that you could latch onto again to be like, no, look, that's there. We've got that. Let's go to New York and play CMJ and try and find an agent and try and find all these different things. And once those things kept moving, I was like, I'm patient. I'm a patient person. Yeah.
Well, did you have to develop tools to cope with this? Because you were talking earlier about those performances when you're a little bit younger, and sometimes you just stop halfway through, or perhaps you weren't mentally prepared for that show. Now you're in a bit of a grind. The album starts to do well. You're touring. You're touring the world. You're playing show after show after show. At this point, have you conquered those confidence issues?
Yeah, I think the last thing to fall into place for me was like playing live, and it was like you have to have a worst moment. I played a festival in Ireland. And it was unbelievably terrible. It was like, and I would call it an embarrassment of a show. Like there were mitigating factors. There was like a band playing before me that there were like 20 people in the band and the changeover was like 10 seconds. But I went on stage and it just wasn't good. Like I wasn't together. And I remember again, someone saying to one of my managers, "Oh, I saw James at this thing. It was awful." And this was a person that was quite important in the music industry. And I remember that thinking, "Oh, flip. Okay, that's not what I want. I don't want to embarrass myself." And so I sat down at that point and was like, I need to get this together. I need to drill this and treat it differently. So I sat in a room. I brought in friends of mine, and I was like, I'm going to perform for you guys. I'm just going to keep going until this doesn't seem wholly abnormal to me. And then I built out from that. And then it was like an equation, like friends of mine laugh at the equation. But the equation used to be, if I do one good show and 2 bad shows, okay. If I do one good show and 3 bad shows, that's not okay. So I tried to get to a point where it was like 1 good show, 1 bad show. And then it would be 2 good shows, 1 bad show. Right. And then as it went on. So yeah, like the simple reality is like, I wasn't playing enough shows to really get to that point where I was, I would play 1 show every other month. So it was just that show would be bad and it would stay with me.
Right.
So once I started treating it like a job, treating it like something I needed to drill and get better at and rehearse and practice, then it got better. And then the equation became more and more on my side. So by the time those people started showing up in like the middle of that summer in 2010, I was good. If they came to a show, I was like, I'm relatively confident this is going to be one of the good ones. So we'll be in good shape.
And I think it was towards the end of the touring cycle for Early in the Morning that you played the Royal Festival Hall, and it was a sold out show. And then after that show, you decided to give up booze. Why?
Yeah. I think these things become these like crutches for me. I would look back, the great unspoken thing is that like, if I look back at all those shows, there was definitely like drink involved because it takes the edge off and it doesn't make you better, but it makes you less aware to the point where like I could do what I needed to do. So from the very inception point of me as a live performer, alcohol was involved, not in an abusive way, but just there all the time. And then as things become more and more successful, so we went through 2010, I was trying and trying and trying. And then in 2011, it was all just happening. Everything was just falling into place. But I'd spent a year like grinding. And then I was into this year of another type of grind, which was like on a tour bus, in a van, play big shows, small shows, all over the place, because, you know, I could go to like the UK and play to 2,000 people, but then I would go to Germany and play to 300. So you're mentally, you are just all over the map. And alcohol then just became part of like the repertoire for us on tour. I added a band, I had a crew. If it was a party, it was a good party for a long time. But like every good party, eventually you're like, I need to leave. Like, I need to get out of this party. Like it's happened since the dawn of time. Like, you know, there's a point where you're like, I don't want to be here anymore. And that just happened to me like around that show. It was like the pinnacle. It was like the highlight, you know, whatever it was, like 2,500 people in London, heavily sold out, like lots of famous people, all sorts of stuff. And I don't really remember it. Like, I remember just being really nervous and sort of remember drinking red wine before the show, because that's the thing you drink when you're a professional musician. And just going out on stage and delivering what was probably a decent performance. I don't think it was what the audience wanted. I think, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's a huge part of it, was like that sense of responsibility and getting the formula wrong in terms of your interaction with the audience. People are paying money to come and see me. They deserve me to be wholly immersed in the process, in the mix, in the real moment, and not just like a bit pissed and giving you that version of me. There's some people that do that really well. That sort of like, you know, piss caricature on stage. Fucking, it's not me. It was just not crack at all. So I stopped, and it coincided with, like, I would say not a mental breakdown, but like, you know, someone, who did I see recently? Someone abbreviated mental breakdown down to like a mentee B. So it was a bit of a mentee B on my part. It was like, I just didn't want to be that person. I wanted to be, you know, I wanted to get back to a quieter version of myself. So I took a little break, and then I came to Australia, and that was the first time I'd ever played shows that I hadn't been drinking, and they were really great. But also, like, I was probably a bit ropey because I was just suddenly hyper aware of everything, and they were tiny shows as well. We'd gone from playing like, you know, 2,500 a night to 200 to 300 in Melbourne and Sydney and places. So it was like, it was great. It felt like a crash course in reality and how profound reality can be. You know, that's a thing. You think that like musicians, there's people I know that won't go in the studio without the trappings of the musical aesthetic, which is a very rounded way of saying like drinking drugs, basically, like, which is chill. Like, and because I get it. That's what you think you need to do in order to create. You need to have these things around you. Once I discovered that wasn't what I needed, it was huge, because then I was like, oh, the door is open for anything, right? Like, that was led into the post-tropical album campaign, where I was like, okay, a lot more is possible here, because if I know that I don't need this, then what else don't I need? And what else can I achieve without those crutches? Wow. So it was a lovely moment. Yeah.
And that you've just reminded me of another lyric in Gone, where I'm probably going to stuff this up, but it's along the lines of, don't do as many drugs as I used to, still do a lot. So
yeah, I do less drugs than I used to, still do a lot. Right. Yeah.
So is that real as well?
I mean, everything on this album is very real. Yeah, it is. You know, like it's everything in moderation, right? Like, you know, it is the thing. It's like, yeah, everything in moderation. I think that's when I stopped drinking at the time. There was a couple of people in the press here that made quite a lot of it, where they were like, oh, James is giving, like I was, and I hated that, because not because I feel judged or feel like seen inappropriately or wrong, but more because I never want to, like, alcoholism is a very real thing. It's a very real thing in my family. You know, like, my grandmother was an alcoholic. She stopped drinking 30 years before she died. She just cut it when she was 60 years old, which in the 90s in Ireland was a very tough thing to do. And so there was like almost like an anecdotalness to it, how they were talking about it, which is like, I don't like this, because these are real things for real people. What I was saying was that, like, I don't want to be someone that misses the moments because I'm using these things as crutches and I think I'll get better. It certainly wasn't me saying like, I'm done with this stuff. There's still those things in my life, and I just didn't want to conflate my story with the real harrowing stories of these things. So it became this sort of slightly strange topical conversation here, where people were sort of like going, oh, like, how bad was it? And I was like, don't make any mistake. I wasn't that, because that is a very serious thing that deserves a lot of column inches and a lot of conversation in a profound way. I was just saying that, like, I didn't want to be bound by those things, and I was fortunate that I was able to make a choice in that. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you think about all the things that we've spoken about today, do they all feel like steps to Grapefruit season? Do they all feel like just lessons that you had to learn and moves you had to make to get to this point?
Yeah, they do. I mean, to lead to this album, to lead to like the next album, to lead to the one after that, to lead to the next process. You know, I've started writing a lot for other people. I've started producing a lot of records for other people in the last year. All of those things wouldn't be possible without those moments before it. I don't live in a paradigm where like everything is leading to a point, because I think that's how I was living. I was living based on this idea that like it would get to a pinnacle, or it would get to a moment where I would feel this sense of payoff, this cathartic payoff. And I don't want to live in that reality anymore. I find it so much more comfortable here, where like I'm incredibly proud of this record. I'm proud of what it does. I'm proud of what it says. I'm proud of the fact that I could coalesce this chaos into something that is hopefully meaningful to people, that I can get on stage and sing and occupy fully in a way that I was never able to before. And my hope is that when I make the next thing, I'll be able to expand on that and refine it down into something more succinct, because that feels much more compelling to me. And it feels more open-ended, because that other thing didn't feel open-ended. It felt like it would get to a moment where I'd be like, okay, turn the light off. Like, and I'm not in it for that. You know, it's music is an obsession and a vocation. So I feel very comfortable with the reality right now. And I feel very excited at the possibilities, and I can't hand on heart say that that's always been the case. Like even in moments of real, you know, massive success, I can't say that I was like, the possibilities here feel endless. It almost felt like you were trapped by the moments, whereas now it feels like, you know, those moments are fleeting, and I appreciate that, and I'll appreciate them in those moments because of that.
Sure.
So yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, with some of the production work that you're doing now, I mean, you've just worked on this record with Paul Epworth and Kenny Beats, for example. Do you learn things from the people that you work with, like 1985 on We Move?
Yeah.
Do you learn things from these people that you can then apply to some of the production work that you do and the songwriting work that you do?
Oh, absolutely. They are 85, I would say, was like the key to unlocking this stage of my career. And I've said that to him, and he knows it. That because I'm trying to learn the lessons in real time, and I think I have enough about me, even in those moments where I felt slightly trapped by the moments, to still kind of see the route out. When I came out of Post-Tropical and I realized I'd put all this effort into these things that the album wasn't necessarily giving me back, I would have been a fool to not learn those lessons. I would have been a fool to not see the writing on the wall. The writing was that, like, as a producer, I can get to here. Here's my ceiling. All these other people are doing this day in, day out. They can see things. They have a perspective that I just simply don't have. So when I met 85 and we went in the studio, and he started getting really ruthless with me, like muting things off and also showing me a route to the goal. Take a song like Get Low off that We Move record. I've been trying to make that song my entire life. Not that specific one, but that idea. I grew up wanting to be a singer-songwriter, Sufjan Stevens, Neil Young, but I wanted to be Pharrell Williams. I wanted to be the Neptunes. I wanted to put 808s on guitars and make it sing and make it feel profound and not feel lumpy. And he gave it to me. Within 10 minutes, I gave him Get Low, and he muted everything except the guitar and the vocal, and he put his world around it, and it felt completely natural. And it was one of the big songs off that record, and it was the touchstone song off that record. And I think that taught me again. I was like, okay, I would never have gotten to that place. I can't be egotistical enough to think that I am the answer to my own problems. So that opened up this whole world, where on that album, I worked with him, I worked with 2 Inch Punch, I worked with Frank Dukes, unbelievable genius producers that gave me a thing I could never get to. And then that carried on to this album. You know, Paul Epworth has been on my list, godlike producers, for my entire life. You know, since I was in school and I heard the Block Party album, I've been obsessed with him, and probably in an unhealthy way. Like, you know, he's but like it still trips me out. Like, I go to London this weekend, I'm working with him on another project, and it still trips me out that we're friends. Like, because I think he's a genius, and I think that he's such a good person, and he taught me so much through this process of this album, because again, he has the perspective that, you know, I can never get to. But I can bring a perspective that he can never get to. And that's the thing that you need to appreciate in these moments, is like, I value myself as a songwriter and as a lyricist and as someone that can bring a reality, a candid reality, but make it sing. And he is someone that can bring this other perspective. So to not try and combine those things and make something better is a musical life wasted. So I love those relationships and how they formed and how they now lead into all these beautiful other moments. It's like, again, it's the journey, right? It's not the destination. It's the journey of it all. Yeah.
That feels like a perfect segue into the final question, which is Jaxsta is all about giving credit where credit's due. Are there people you give credit to for helping you get where you are today?
Do you mean musicians in the world that I've loved, or just people?
People, as broad as you'd like to make it.
I mean, yes. Like I've mentioned a couple of people there. Like I mentioned, like for anyone that's listening to this that is in music, you need to find like people that wake up in the morning and their job, their passion is you. They need to like go into the world with this sense of self-possession. Like, I'm going to make something happen for James. I had that in my publisher, Felix Howard, when I was a completely useless, like 23, 24-year-old that couldn't like do anything functional really. He kind of saw through all of the mess and was like, there's something in here that's brilliant. And he would like really kind of shielded me and protected me through the process. So I'm always grateful to him. He's kind of a wild human. He's gone and lived a crazy life, and he's come back into my world from time to time. Until my dying day, he's someone that I'll always pick up the phone to, because those people, if you find them in music, you hold on to them, right? Because they're true blue. Same with my manager, Ken. Like, he was a very honest, humble person in the beginning. He understood again when other people were kind of dismissing me. Then I talked about my family. Like, everybody I've talked about are the people I'd highlight. Like my wife Emma, she's been with me since like day one as well. Like, I met her at one of the first shows I ever played, and so she's seen the whole process in real time. She's been like an advocate for me. She's been like a protector of me at moments when I've definitely needed protection, because I am a very open person in a lot of respects, to a fault. And so again, having a good solid protection around you as just as a human being, I think we've learned all that in the last year as well. We need that human contact. We need those protective structures around us. So all those people I would highlight.
Fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
James, thanks so much for your time. It's been so great to chat to you.
Pleasure. Really enjoyed this, actually. Yeah, I was a little worried that like what kind of a podcast you were going to get from me at like 9 a.m. in the morning, Rod, but I think we got to a good place, so I feel good.
And that's it for another episode of Humans of Music. A big thanks to James for his time, and thank you for listening. And just a reminder that James's new album, Grapefruit Season, is out now. If you have any feedback on the show or suggestions on who you'd like me to interview, or even if you just want to say hello, please drop me a line at humansofmusic@jaxsta.com. That's Humans of Music, one word, at Jaxsta, JAXSTA.com. This episode was mixed by Lachlan Mitchell from Parliament Studios in Annandale, and the incidental music and theme song were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. Please remember to subscribe to the Humans of Music podcast so you never miss an episode, or even better, share it amongst your friends and rate and review it. And remember, next time you need to know who wrote a song, who produced a song, who engineered it, who played on it, who sang on it, who did anything on it, head to jaxsta.com for all your official music credit information. Until the next episode of Humans of Music, I'm Rod Yates. Thanks for listening.